Is a reader who has been very important in the Baltimore media world. Marianne Amoss is a lifelong Baltimorean and former managing editor of the late lamented Urbanite Magazine. May it rest in peace. Where she spearheaded coverage of Baltimore's arts and crafts scene. She's also written for such publications as Johns Hopkins Magazine, Baltimore City Paper, Baltimore Fishbow, Next American City, and the Baltimore Sun. Please welcome Marianne Amoss.
Hi everyone, thanks so much for coming. I want to thank John and Deborah for inviting me to be part of the Ladies' Night and for hosting New Mercury. It's really exciting to have this series here in general, so thank you so much for doing it. I am going to read an essay that I wrote for Baltimore Fishbow that was published in January that's about raising backyard chickens. My ex-boyfriend and I decided to adopt a flock of 1-week-old chickens, even though we had no idea what we were doing, and just put them in a coop in his backyard and see what happened. And so it turned out to be kind of an interesting experience. We learned that chickens in the backyard fall somewhere between pet and farm animal, and along with that comes both just some sort of confused feelings about what kind of attachment we should form with these animals. And so a little bit of background too. We just wanted to adopt 6 of them. We ended up adopting 11, and we gave away 3 of them, and then 4 or 5 of them have died so far. So this essay is about that. It's called Chicken Little. On a cold, early winter evening, I peeked into the coop to check on the chickens. As usual, 5 of them were snuggled up next to each other on the roost, a tree branch my boyfriend Jared had affixed to the wall of the coop. But one, the jet black Americana we named Thing because of the silly, fuzzy feathers on her face, have been left out. She was huddled alone in the corner on the coop floor below the other chickens, the spot reserved for the last in the pecking order. Last spring, almost immediately after we picked up our 1-week-old chicks from Whitmore Farms in Emmitsburg, the pecking order of our small flock was established. The 2 white Delaware hens, we dubbed them Mrs. Hennelsworth and Ladybird, names that sounded bossy and matronly to us, took charge. They're the friendliest, the bravest, and the biggest birds. And as the big mama, Mrs. Hennelsworth will discipline any chicken that gets out of line. For instance, if the others make a lot of noise while flying out of their coop into the run, the fenced-in area of the yard that allows them to roam outside yet be protected, she'll express her annoyance with a quick nip to the back of the neck. It doesn't seem to hurt, but it sends a clear message. Cut it out. The pecking order establishes top bird and bottom bird and all the birds in between. It's thought to preemptively resolve any energy expending fights over resources, so it makes sense. And in practical terms, it means that Mrs. Hennelsworth gets what she wants. I see it when I drop treats of apples, cabbage, and other fresh food into the run. Mrs. Hennelsworth gets her pick, and the other birds take what's left. Our other chickens, 2 beautiful French Morans we call Sylvia Plath and Bernadette Peters, and Sophia Conchetta, a talkative black and white Ancona named after Jared's Sicilian grandmother. They get a nip from Mrs. Hennelsworth every now and then. But it seems that Thing, the one with the weird fuzzy face, gets in trouble more often than the others. She seems to be most often pecked, most often shoved out of the way, most often denied access to the amenities that the other hens enjoy. Why pick on the smallest bird just because she's little? It reminds me of middle school girls singling out their weakest classmate to torture. And how does denying any one of its members access to food and warmth benefit the whole flock? I trust the chickens to do its best, but I worry about Thing. I worry about Thing the way I worried about Little Brown, the first chicken of our flock who died. And just a side note, I named her Little Brown after Little Brown and Co., the publishing house, and then she died, which you'll find out, which I felt like was a sort of ironic twist considering the state of the publishing industry these days. Little Brown was squarely at the bottom of the totem pole from the beginning. A beautiful brown and gold well summer, She was the only chick who could be sexed or identified as male or female when she was a week old, so we knew from the beginning that she was a little girl. She was small and very sweet. The group pushover, she never complained when the other chicks stepped on her or woke her up from a nap. She just took whatever they dished out and went on her way. She was immediately and without a doubt our favorite. Little Brown got sick one evening in September when she was about 5 months old, and Jared and I were heartbroken and totally unprepared. We didn't have any antibiotics on hand, and we hadn't done any reading on chicken illnesses. We knew we should isolate her for her own sake as much as the other chickens, as she might infect them or get pecked to death in the flock's attempt at self-preservation. They had already figured out that she was sick. Mrs. Hennelsworth had kept her from entering the coop the night before, which is what tipped us off that something was wrong. So we settled Little Brown in a roomy cardboard box in the basement with a bed of shavings and plenty of food and water. For several days she lay there, listing to one side. Her toes were curled up, and tremors racked her little body. As much as we loved her, Jared and I balked at taking her to an avian vet because of the cost. I appealed to friends and fellow chicken farmers for advice, but her symptoms didn't point straight at any one thing. I suspected she had a viral disease that's common in chickens and is incurable, but there was no way for us to know for sure. Why had this happened? Perhaps Little Brown, the only one of her kind, was susceptible to something that the others had been able to fight off. Maybe we newbie chicken parents had done something wrong. Or maybe it could be that because she was the littlest chicken, she was denied the nutrition, warmth, and companionship she needed to survive. So I started to wonder, had the flock's instinctual behavior doomed her since the beginning? Jared had to go out of town that weekend to a conference, and before he left, we talked about our contingency plans. If I get back and she's sleeping, he said. You can say dead, I said, thinking he was trying to protect my feelings. I didn't want to, he said, his face crumpling. I spent the weekend visiting Little Brown, kneeling by the side of her cardboard box and encouraging her to eat and drink. I gave her B vitamins, Pedialyte with a dropper, treats of hard-boiled egg yolks, which I know sounds gross, but chickens really like egg yolks. Sometimes she seemed perkier, and once or twice I found her eating on her own. And although she wasn't getting worse, she also wasn't getting any better. I wondered how I would know when enough was enough. When I picked Jared up from the airport late on Sunday night, I told him tearfully that I thought it might be time to think about putting Little Brown down. Once we got back to Jared's house and went to see her, he agreed with me. We'd never done anything like this before, so this might be a little gross, but it's not very descriptive. But I'll keep reading. Spoiler alert. We did some quick research to see if there was any way to do it besides the stomach-turning act of breaking her neck ourselves. But there were no other options that would be as quick and relatively painless for her. Jared told me he would do it, and he headed downstairs, visibly steeling himself. A few minutes later, I heard a loud squawk, and my stomach turned. I put an old episode of The Office on Jared's iPad, closed the door, and put my hands over my ears. 10 minutes later, when he came back upstairs, he went straight into the bathroom. I heard water running. When he finally came out of the bathroom, I said, "Was it awful?" "Yes," he said. We buried Little Brown under a persimmon tree, saying goodbye with a short and sad ceremony. It's not something I look forward to doing again. Life and death are part and parcel of raising any animal, and I've known since we picked up the little fuzzballs from the farm that we would have to face these things, especially if one day we decided to eat them for dinner. But our hens aren't just farm animals. They're also our pets. We made that choice when we gave them names and let ourselves love them. And when one of them dies, we don't just bemoan the loss of an egg producer. We mourn the loss of a friend and a companion. So as for whether the flock's behavior contributed to Little Brown's death or will end up harming Thing, there's no way to know. The chickens will do what they will, the same way they've done it for thousands of years. All we can do is nourish and protect them as best we can. The rest is up to them. I'll try to remember that the next time I say goodnight to them, with 5 up on the roost and the one down below. Thank you.